Hi,
Hi.
hello.
How are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Very, very well. You can see me, you can hear me clearly.
We can, yeah, we can hear you clearly, which is amazing because there's always some technical glitch. So great to see you and hear you.
You too. I'm going to have a guess that you're at home.
I am at home.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might hear my kids running around in the background, homeschooling, trying to homeschool. So yeah, I've banned them from here for half an hour. So hopefully they'll listen to me.
Well,
Right,
let's see
let's
what
get
happens.
started.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. It's my pleasure to be joined by the wonderful Mandu Reid, leader of the Women's Equality Party here in the UK. Before we get started, if you have any questions for Mandu, just send them through and I'll get to as many as possible towards the end of our chat. Right, before we get into the questions, I wanted to briefly introduce Mandu. I've only got a few points here, but I could actually fill a book with her achievements. Described by The Guardian as the brightest hope in British feminism, Mandu previously worked for 3 different mayors of London on a range of different policy areas, as well as the 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games. In 2015, she founded The Cup Effect, a charitable social enterprise providing menstrual education and the use of menstrual cups. In 2019, she was recognised as one of the top 100 most influential people in global gender policy, alongside the likes of Michelle Obama and Melinda Gates. And she was appointed leader of the party earlier this year. Wow, well, Mandu, welcome. We're so excited to have you. So look, unsurprisingly, I'm going to start with the questions about COVID. It's definitely been at the forefront of what we've been talking about for the last few weeks. But now, as we're starting to think about and kind of talk about a post-lockdown world, I wanted to know what your thoughts are on the way that the government has handled the pandemic so far.
I mean, it's a bit of a grim way to start the conversation, but I think it's fair to say that the failure of this government to take decisive action has been well discussed. You know, it's been well documented. There's been cabinet infighting. You've got the hawks over there, you've got the doves over here, and very little kind of cooperation or clear strategy from the outset, despite us having a head start on other countries in the world and I suppose the opportunity to observe how it's unfolded elsewhere. But there have been some real lows, you know, in my view. Matt Hancock kind of trying to acknowledge the mission critical contribution of our care workers by offering them a badge. I mean, that would be funny if it wasn't so serious. That's the kind of thing which I think is symbolic of the shortcomings of the approach we've seen. I mean, I'm directly affected by this in my own family. My father's been very unwell. I'm sure other people listening have had direct experience too. And I can't help thinking that at the root of these issues is, well, there are many factors, but one of them is the government being blindsided by a lack of diverse experience and thinking in key roles. I think that's not helped this government at all. And the classic thing of representation, of, you know, balanced decision-making groups involving women alongside men, people from different backgrounds having their say, playing their part. We would have had, in my view, a much better strategy if that was in place. So and the last thing I want to say on this is kind of, you know, how it's seen as a male stereotype, right, of leadership, this thing of decisiveness, but we haven't really experienced that despite having a male-dominated leadership here. And when you compare what Jacinda Ardern has done, for example, in New Zealand, that's decisiveness, you know, that is decisiveness coupled with compassion. And so I feel like our government, I'm sure they're trying their best, but there's a lot they can learn from the way this has been handled by other governments. Hopefully, you know, the only way is up, and we'll see that they're yet to show us the kind of best work they're able to do. But that'll only happen if they learn.
Hopefully. So listen, we talked about diversity here, but obviously we're interested in talking about women and how COVID has had a disproportionate effect on women. So, you know, from a work point of view, in terms of unemployment, freelancers losing contracts, you know, female founders can't raise the funds that they need for their businesses, and also horrifyingly in terms of domestic violence.
Yes.
Are the government doing enough to protect women? What else could we be doing? And we can talk about work specifically later, but let's just talk about this point on domestic violence to start with.
Yeah, I think the response on domestic violence has been really, really slow. And again, it's not as if it's taken anybody by surprise. We saw what happened in China. We saw what happened in Italy, France, Spain, domestic violence rates spiking. And so I feel that there's actually no excuse for the fact that we're now 5 weeks in to this lockdown, and not a single extra penny has been spent by this government to reach the frontline organizations that are doing their best to support and help victims of domestic abuse. They have had a go, you know, they spent £2 million to boost the helpline capacity. They've done a social media campaign. But what really troubles me about all of that is it's all well and good saying, right, if you're experiencing this, here's a number you can ring. Here's a campaign to raise awareness, you know, hand on your heart and all of that stuff. But if I'm in desperate, dire need, and then I ring up that hotline, but there's no way for me to be helped, there's no refuges for me to be housed in, there's no way for the perpetrator to be removed from the household so me and my kids don't have to flee, that for me is a kind of unforgivable shortcoming. And you can't say that it's too difficult, it's too complicated. This government's done extraordinary things. I'm really impressed with the economic package they managed to roll out, billions of pounds being made available at the drop of a hat. That's political will. It shows you what can be done when the political will is there. But when it comes to this issue, there's a kind of a dragging of feet, and it's inexcusable because people's lives are being lost, people's lives are being ruined. And I think when the lockdown starts to ease, what we're going to see is a massive avalanche of demand for these services that are already underfunded. And when, you know how we're talking about the exit strategy for lockdown, what we need is the domestic abuse commissioner. Her name's Nicole Jacobs. She's great. We need her around the table in the COBRA meetings as they design the approach to ease us out of lockdown. Because if they don't do that, we're going to have a situation where the women who finally are able to escape these violent environments they've been trapped in aren't actually in a position to get the help they need. And so if anybody from government's listening, or anybody who has influence on anyone from government's listening, there's a really straightforward way we can signal, and not just signal, in actual fact, do right by women. And that is put women around the table with all the decision making, spend the money because the money's there. You've shown us it's there for other things, and acknowledge the fact that actually this is about people's lives. You know, 2 women a week die at the hands of their partner or ex-partner in normal circumstances. Since lockdown started, that's doubled. You know, it's now about 5 women a week. So far, the tally is 16 people in total. 2 children and 14 women have been killed in their homes in lockdown. If that's not enough to unlock the funding and the support, then I really don't know what is.
It's absolutely horrifying in terms of statistics. And I know a lot of charities are obviously hugely underfunded and are trying to pool resources and raise awareness of this specific issue. UN Women are just launching something called Everyday Allyship, which is about pooling resources and also helping communities feel hopefully a bit less powerless, that they can actually do something. So if we're not in government, you know, the listeners here are not in government, what can we actually do to help on that specific topic?
You can tell your MP that you care about it, and I'm talking about literally send them an email if you like, but my understanding is their inboxes are totally clogged up. At the moment, social media is a much more effective way, and the reason why that would not be a waste of time right here, right now, is because not yesterday, the day before yesterday, Parliament met to debate the domestic abuse bill, which is, I'm really pleased that's going through Parliament. That's super positive, but it's only at its second reading. And what we at the Women's Equality Party are actually calling for are emergency measures. The way it works with the bill is you have second reading, then it goes to committee, then it comes back and gets debated, then it goes to the House of Lords. So this wonderful bill, which it's not perfect, but it's pretty good, which will change lives and change the law to protect women, will only have an effect in at least a year's time. So right now, what we need is the government to be leaned on and persuaded to put emergency measures in place. And at the moment, social media is the most effective way of doing that, because the government's quite conscious of how it's being perceived and a little bit sensitive at the moment, and I think they should be. So this is the moment. I mean, in a couple of weeks' time, when the attention on this issue is frittered away again, it's less likely to have the same effect. But you can also try and support your local domestic abuse refuges, give them a ring, see what they need. They may need food packages, they may need, you know, help and support with other stuff, and obviously donations never go amiss in a sector like the women's sector, which has been woefully underfunded for such a long time.
Sure, that's great, really practical advice.
No problem.
And let's talk a bit about the landscape for women and work.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's a chance that this pandemic could set us all back in the workplace after all we've fought for? There's lots of conversations going on about this at the moment, and I would love to get your views.
Yeah, I think it could go either way. And part of the reason I say that is, on the one hand, the epidemic has accelerated an awareness of the fact that it's possible for people to work flexibly and more people to work from home, right? So if you work in a big corporation and they've had all sorts of resistance and excuses and reasons why, oh, it's too difficult, it doesn't work for business continuity, you can't do it. I think all of those objections have now been leapfrogged by these corporations thinking, bloody hell, to keep going, this is the only way we can operate. So on the one hand, that's good news. I think what is a counterbalance to that, and is slightly worrying, is the extent to which, as the economy recovers, the extent to which women are going to be expected to kind of do even more than we have been doing, right? In relation to, there's the jobs that we do, there's the childcare and other caring responsibilities that we do unpaid, and I'm a little bit fearful that we'll be in a situation where you know, men and men's jobs will be prioritized in order to get the economy moving again and kickstart all of that, and deal with the fact that you know, a lot of nurseries, for example, and other childcare providers have gone out of business. Right? So women who are kind of going back to work when things return to normal, it may be that in a heterosexual couple, the expectation is, well, it's much harder to get childcare at the moment, or much more expensive because the supply's smaller. So the woman's going to have to make the sacrifice and do the bulk of the work, even more so than she would have otherwise done, while the economy kind of tries to crank back up and get back into gear. And I think there's a real danger there. And what we need is we need negotiations to happen in households whereby it isn't just default, right? That the woman's going to do that and pick up the slack. Our boyfriends and our husbands and the fathers of our children, they got a role to play, and they can really help create a situation where you know, we're still in the prologue of this crisis. They can play a role in helping make sure the epilogue of this crisis is a crisis where we're all doing a fairer share of the work that needs to be done, unpaid in the household, paid in the workplace. So it could go either way, you know?
It could go both ways.
Yeah.
There's definitely an understanding now, it's sort of highlighted how much women have tended to shoulder the household chores and the childcare and sort of domestic duties. And on the one hand, there's probably been acknowledgement from, you know, many men within sort of heterosexual couples about that. But then on the other hand, there'll be people wanting to run back to work because they realise how hard it is. So yeah, it will be very interesting to see what happens. Yeah. Is there anything that you think we, again, from a sort of proactive standpoint, anything that we should be doing, the way that we're communicating with our companies, lobbying government, or just as women, to raise the issues that you are worried that may, you know, may happen after we get back to work? You know, I mean, there's lots of discussion about the gender pay gap and reporting there, it could be postponed, or what should we be doing actively? I mean, we are at AllBright, we're very focused on sort of practical and pragmatic solutions. So we are focused on how we can upskill as many women as possible so that they feel like they are using this time, that when they go back to work, they have the tools that they need to be able to do those negotiations and to kind of expand their networks, etc. But what else should we be doing?
I mean, I think a really basic thing is just becoming fluent in some of the basics and some of the ways that the dynamic works, you know, at micro level, so in your household and in your own employer, but also at macro level in the country more broadly. Because when you have that vocabulary, it really helps explain, and sometimes to people who are more powerful than you, who in my life and my experience, I'm often find myself in a situation where it's men who are more powerful than me, and half the time they just don't know, or they just don't realize. And so a couple of little examples. I think on the one hand, corporations, when the economy starts trying to crank back up again, are going to want to get to optimal productivity as soon as possible, right? And one of the ways that I think they can do that is by recognizing how kind of screwed the childcare industry is at the moment, and supporting their employees who are parents. And I use the word parents very carefully because I'm talking about dads and mums. So if there was a way for, you know, I'm talking about the big corporations here who have money to spend on looking after their workforce. If they could give a little break or something, or some support around childcare, which would be harder to come by and more expensive, that would be a brilliant way for them to get competitive advantage. And I think us as women can make those arguments when we go back to the workplace. We can encourage our partners to make, if our partners are men, to make those arguments. And I think there'll be a moment when we're all trying to get back into gear where that actually, there'll be an open door and a window where those arguments will be listened to and will be heard. And there are corporations like, I mean, Goldman Sachs, last year invested £1 billion in completely transforming their HQ in London. It's got childcare facilities, it's got breastfeeding rooms, it's got all sorts of stuff. And they did that because they want competitive advantage, right? They want to be able to attract parents and attract women to their workplace. And I think other corporations could, in this situation, be persuaded to do similar things, which would be really helpful to women and helpful to families more broadly. Bigger picture, again, and this is not me making it up just because I want to believe this. This is fact, right? When we're trying to rebuild the economy, the arguments need to be made that if you invest in social infrastructure, so that is care more broadly, childcare, care for the elderly, even sort of NHS type care, sectors that women primarily work in. If you invest 2% of GDP into social infrastructure, you create twice as many jobs than if you invest in construction. Now, people don't realize that. And half the time people don't realize that because half the time people up there making those decisions are men. It just doesn't occur to them. It's not that they're bastards, they just don't know. And so I think there's a moment now when all these conversations and these narratives around how do you rebuild the economy are happening, where the more of us who have a bit of a voice, have a bit of a platform, the more fluent we are, the more influential we can be. And so I can share with you, perhaps you might want to share with your members, just some really nice, clear, simple resources that will give anybody who wants to the vocabulary to make these arguments. And it's all proper, credible, fully, modeled, costed stuff that's been done by economists. It just doesn't usually get the airtime it deserves.
Sure, yeah, that would be fantastic.
No problem.
let's talk a bit about your own experience of work. So you made British history as the first woman of colour to lead a political party in the UK last year. How have the last 12 months been for you, and what is give us your vision for the party?
Yeah, gosh, I feel like contradictory emotions. I felt that when I began doing the job, and I still feel them now. So one pair of contradictory emotions is that I feel proud and I feel humbled. You see, those are totally contradictory, right? Sure. On the other hand, I feel really daunted, but utterly fired up. Again, those two things are contradictory. And part of the reason why I feel daunted, let's just go there. And I think I try and be somebody that's open about my vulnerability where I can. I've only just learned how to do that. I'm 39. It took me a long time, but here I am. For me, doing this job, being a woman in politics in general, being a woman of color in politics, definitely, for me doing this job, a lot of the time the margin for error feels so small and the stakes feel so high, because if we don't stand up for women, who will? We're the only political party that really prioritizes equality between men and women. We're the only ones out there that do that without any compromise whatsoever. Because no one else is doing it, I feel a lot of pressure. And I also feel that if I put a foot wrong, it's way more likely that my kind of career is over, or I don't get taken seriously anymore. And I think that's because I'm a woman and because I'm a Black woman. So there's all of these things that I'm trying to navigate all day long, all the time. But really, my vision for this party, I have a term of 5 years as leader. There's a few things. And I'm going to start with something you're probably not expecting me to say, given that we are the Women's Equality Party. I want to see more men in the mix. Yeah. I really do. I think we need men to fight alongside us. We need men to share power with us. And I think, on the one hand, my pitch to men is that they should support the Women's Equality Party out of naked self-interest, because equality benefits them too. It really does. The happier the women are in your life, the women you love, the happier you will be. So come alongside, fight with us. We need you. And the other thing that I want to say about men is that when it comes to stuff that we've already touched on, if they share some of the unpaid care work, that, by the way, women's unpaid care work contributes 77 billion to the economy every year. If the men shared that with us, they would get to express different parts of themselves, have a better quality of life, as well as reaping the benefits of having women in their lives who are more happy, more fulfilled, less frustrated. I mean, it's win-win. And then but with the dark underbelly of our work, we already talked about violence against women and girls, right? Now, frankly, the only people who can end male violence against women and girls are men. Sure. They're the only ones who can stop it from happening, because they are the perpetrators. And so for me, a movement, a feminist movement, whatever it is, that doesn't have a way of embracing and engaging men is only going to get so far. So I feel like we need them in the mix. I'm not going to pander to them, but we need them in the mix. And since I've been leader, the proportion of men within our membership has gone up. It was less than 5%. It's now around 8%. I want to see more of them in the mix. So invite your husbands, your boyfriends, whatever. Make that their birthday present, a Women's Equality Party membership. Why not?
That is a great idea. I love that. Yeah, we call them enlightened men. They absolutely have to be on the journey with us. But look, you speak very passionately, but I know that once upon a time you swore off joining political parties. So talk to us a bit about what changed your mind, and also how you're talking about the pressures a lot. And we hear this a lot, that particularly when women sort of put their head above the precipice, that they're getting shot down quite quickly. Have you felt that pressure personally as well? In terms of trolling and people being kind of vicious.
I've had a smattering of that, but I'm really fortunate that I've not been on the receiving end of this sort of avalanche of abuse people like Diane Abbott receive, or even Sophie Walker, who's our previous leader. I so far, it's like maybe they haven't noticed me, and I'm not looking forward to the time when and if they do. So that's a positive thing for a start. But yeah, I didn't want to be a member of a political party. I used to be a member of the Labour Party back in the day, and I left because I just felt I was always having to compromise the things I believe in for some other agenda. You know, equality between men and women was always kind of, everyone said the right things and smiled nicely. But what I didn't ever feel was that it was often a footnote, you know, in the manifestos of other parties. Women are always being told to just wait their turn and look, be grateful for what equality you've had so far. Hang on in there, your time will come. And that was just not enough for me. That felt like a waste of my energy, a waste of my passion.
That's what we have as well. We have this sort of, isn't this done? Are we still going on about this?
We're still going on about it. And I mean, the reason why I ended up joining the Women's Equality Party is a little bit personal, because I accidentally got pregnant when I was 33 years old. It wasn't a planned thing. I wasn't in a proper relationship with the man. He was actually a lot younger than me. But when we had to make a decision, well, I had to make a decision about what to do. I couldn't imagine a situation, and neither could he, where I wasn't the sole or main caregiver of the child. Never mind the fact that I earned more money. Never mind the fact that my career was way more advanced. That's the excuse that's normally given. Men earn more, so the woman will do the childcare. That wasn't the case in my situation, but we still had an assumption that it'd be me who did it. And I didn't feel that I could, at that time, bring a child into the world, be a single parent, and honor my kind of ambitions and plans, career plans for my life. I know there are many women who do it, and I'm in awe of them. I'm totally in awe of them. But I didn't feel I could do it. So I had an abortion. And then when I learned shortly after that, about the policies that the Women's Equality Party have around equal parenting and caregiving, if those were national policies, right? Free universal childcare up to age 5, properly shared parental leave, so whether I was in a proper relationship with this man or not, we could really split the childcare without either of us taking a disproportionate hit career-wise or financially. I would have been able to keep that baby if I wanted to, if the Women's Equality Party policies were national policy. And that made me realize it's not just cute what the Women's Equality Party is doing. It made me realize that it's really, really important. And if we get as far as I want us to get, it will transform society. It'll mean my kids, if I do have any in future, won't have to kind of weigh up the same equation I did if they find themselves in the situation I was in. It would transform things for boys and young men as much as it would transform things for girls and young women. And so I realized, yeah, this isn't just something that it's sort of got feel-good factor. This is stuff that could change our society if it was adopted by the mainstream political parties.
And are the mainstream political parties listening to you?
Slowly, yes. We're only 5 years old, so I think we've done phenomenally well for a party that's only 5 years old. And what we're starting to see is them realize that there's an advantage for them in adopting the policies we've been fighting for, right? COVID's a perfect example. The Women's Equality Party hasn't just noticed that it is predominantly women in these frontline jobs that are very low paid and very perilous, right? We've known that all along. But guess what? The other parties are acting like it's some new revelation for them. And I'm hoping that their recognition of the contribution women make, 78%, I think it is, of nurses are women. 82% of the social care workforce are women. That's about, that's several million employees in the country that have been undervalued, underpaid, and underappreciated for the last few decades. The Women's Equality Party has always known that those people are the backbone of our society. So now the stuff that we've been fighting for because of this horrendous crisis is suddenly gaining more political currency. So maybe we're getting closer to the point where we don't need the Women's Equality Party, but I think it's not going to happen as quickly as I'd like.
Do you see yourself as an agitator?
Yeah. That's not all that I am, but it's part of what I am and it's part of what we do. We're also there to set an example. We're also there to create an environment where women feel powerful and feel heard and have the opportunity to express themselves politically, where in other environments they will be shouted down or shunted aside. In the Women's Equality Party, you get political sanctuary. You get a place where you're going to be listened to. You don't have to feel self-conscious about speaking up about what what it's been like for you, or when you had those moments where you realize, hang on a minute, this is a stitch up. If I had a twin brother, exactly the same age as me, exactly the same family, exactly the same education level, there's totally different things to navigate. So in our party, you don't have to explain that to anyone. You never have to explain yourself. So we're doing all sorts of things, agitating, but also providing an antidote to a lot of the ways that politics and commerce and all sorts of other sectors are hostile to women.
And as we hopefully start to come out of this pandemic, end on this question, what do you think? Do you think positive things are going to come out of this situation? So do you think we'll all approach life differently? Kind of what are you hopeful for? So we've talked a lot about the difficult issues and the challenges, but is there some hope coming out of this situation?
Yeah, of course. I think we've touched on many of the things. I think this whole thing of flexible working and making employment environments more accommodating to more people is something that's going to happen at a vastly accelerated rate, and that's absolutely massive. I think the arguments that we've been trying to make as a party for the last 5 years around social care and social care workers, it's going to be a lot easier to make those arguments. And you see, you sort out social care, yeah? And what that does is it contributes to equality between men and women, because you won't have the assumption always that, you know, oh, it's the woman's job primarily to look after the sick parent or whoever else in the community needs support. Those things take maybe half a generation, 10 years or so to really percolate into society. But I think we're getting closer to trying to make those really structural shifts that would transform what it's like to be a woman, to be a girl, and also to be a man and to be a boy. And I also think the example that's been set by other women leaders around the world is a really inspiring example. It shows you don't have to be a kind of like macho chest thumping leader to do a good job. It shows it's going to help women see that they don't have to model male behavior in order to be taken seriously. Jacinda Ardern doesn't, thrust her chest out and kind of replicate the worst, excesses of bad male leadership. She does her own thing and does it in her own way. So do the other women who have performed really well in this crisis. So a new example's been set, and I hope that actually paves the way for other women to be taken more seriously, believe in themselves a little bit more, and maybe 10 years from now, it's closer to us genuinely sharing power with our male counterparts, rather than always it being a hostile conflict between us, you know?
We hope so too.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mandu. Thank you for being so open and honest, and there were lots of messages coming through saying how refreshing it is that someone can talk about themselves in a personal way and with such conviction. So we really, really appreciate you taking the time out to talk to us today. Thank you to everyone for joining us. Please head to AllBright Connect to continue the conversation. I'll be back with my next Instagram Live event on Tuesday, the 5th of May, with Nicola Mendelsohn from Facebook.
Brilliant.
Have a wonderful afternoon and evening, everyone.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye now.
Bye.